On a dark night on September 9, 1980, a supersized cargo ship was battling waves in the Pacific Ocean. Bigger than the Titanic and as tall as a 16-story building, this ship could easily be called a steel fortress. But just a few hours later, there was no trace of it left. No radio signals, no floating debris in the ocean. How did a ship weighing millions of tons just vanish without a trace? For 20 years, the authorities told the world just one thing, that the ship had simply sunk. But when one of the crew members' fathers started digging for the truth, what he found was something was hidden beneath the ocean that opened everyone's eyes wide. Welcome back to Lofarwa TV Videos. On the evening of September 9th, 1980, the massive cargo ship MV Derbyshire was cutting through the deep waves of the Pacific Ocean, heading towards Japan. But at the same time, another visitor was coming from the east. Typhoon Orchid, a storm that was getting more dangerous by the hour, MV Derbyshire had been on the move non-stop for the past 8 weeks. After loading 500 tons of iron from Canada's iron mine, it had crossed the Atlantic Ocean. The ship sailed past the southern shore, cutting through the waves of the Indian Ocean, now nearing its final destination. On board were 42 experienced people, including engineers, helpers, and experts. They were just counting down the last few hours of their journey, but maybe fate had other plans. Captain Jaffrey Underhill, with 20 years of experience, was in charge of this mission. His wife had come all the way from England to Japan, but meeting her now was turning into nothing more than a dream. For days, Captain Underhill had been relying on weather reports. He had faced many storms like this throughout his career. They were confident that Derbyshire could easily handle the typhoon. Safe harbor was still quite far away at this point, so fighting the storm was the only option left. The captain slowed down and turned the ship's direction slightly towards the waves. Ships usually do this during storms to maintain stability. At the same time, the captain sent out an emergency message warning about the situation and sharing the ship's current location. But the storm's fury was only getting worse. The waves had grown over 10 meters high, almost as tall as Derbyshire itself. It stretched on for a long way. At 10 feet, it was even longer and wider than the Titanic and as tall as a 16-story building. This wasn't just any ordinary ship. It was a state-of-the-art steel fortress, built specifically to face the world's most terrifying ocean. That's why for the captain, Typhoon Orchid felt like just another routine challenge, but deep in the dark ocean, something was about to happen that no one had ever imagined. That same night, 2 other ships were also battling the typhoon, but by the next morning, those 2 ships they made it safely to the port. But there was no sign of the MV Derbyshire anywhere. That steel fortress just vanished into thin air without a trace. For the next 20 years, no one could figure out what actually happened that night. On the evening of September 9, 1980, the MV Derbyshire sent its last radio message. After that, there was no distress call, no final message, just a terrifying silence for 6 whole days. Even the ship's owners didn't report it missing. Maybe they just thought the radio contact was lost and the Derbyshire had returned to shore. Maybe it would turn up somewhere. But days went by and there was no news of Derbyshire. On September 15th, for the first time, people started to worry about the ship being missing. An international search mission was launched. Helicopters, airplanes, naval ships, all combed the ocean thoroughly around Derbyshire's last known coordinates. But not even a single piece of that huge ship was found floating anywhere. After 6 days, the search operation was called off. The authorities closed the case, saying the sea had simply swallowed it, and this conclusion was drawn immediately without any investigation. The search and investigation wrapped up quickly, and the news coverage died down just as fast. The families of the MV Derbyshire crew sent multiple requests, but were only told there was nothing worth investigating. The families of the deceased couldn't accept that. They felt like something was being deliberately hidden from them. The MV Derbyshire was a steel ship built just 4 years ago at Britain's famous Swan Hunter shipyard, a ship that could carry over 150 tons of cargo and was 4 times bigger than ships from 20 years ago. It could carry a load. But this time, it wasn't just about size. The design was new, and the Derbyshire was an OBO carrier. It was a modern ship that could carry oil on one side and iron ore on the other. The biggest advantage was cutting down shipping costs, so it never sailed back empty. If it dropped off oil, it'd bring back iron ore. In other words, The ship was always moving and making money for the company. Compared to traditional ships, the MV Derbyshire could make up to 30% more revenue. It was considered a bridge-class ship. Back then, there were only 6 such ships available worldwide. It was built by the famous British shipyard Swan Hunter. At that time, the company was facing a lot of challenges because they were competing against Japanese and South Korean shipyards, which were building the same ships faster and cheaper. Swan Hunter, once the undisputed king of the global shipbuilding industry, was now under a lot of pressure due to these Japanese and South Korean companies. They started cutting costs, and maybe that's where the secret behind the sinking of the MV Derbyshire lies. After this accident, darkness fell over many homes. But for one man, it wasn't just a loss, it became a mission. Peter Redyard had lost his young son in the Derbyshire. But Peter wasn't just a grieving father. He was also an experienced ship surveyor who had spent his life studying the sea and ships. When Peter took matters into his own hands, he uncovered a shocking truth. Just 18 months after the disappearance of the Derbyshire in 1982, another bridge-class ship called the Tyne Bridge was battling storms in the North Sea when suddenly, the ship, cracks started appearing in the steel ahead of the superstructure. The captain ordered a foreign evacuation, and the crew was airlifted to safety. Saving the ship in this accident was almost like a miracle, because maybe even nature wanted to reveal the truth this time. When Peter thoroughly inspected the ship, he found cracks on a part of the front side. After reading some documents, he realized that it wasn't just this ship. Cracks had developed, and then these ships were being quietly sent to ports for repairs. But that's not all. Peter found something even more shocking. The ships weren't built according to the original design plans. Some parts were rushed and made differently from the original specs. Now Peter had evidence that could possibly reopen the MV Derbyshire investigation. He gathered all the proof and sent it to the Department of Transportation. But instead of taking any action, they just said that the sinking of the Derbyshire was properly. The investigation is already done, and there's no plan for a new inquiry. The authorities have turned a deaf ear, but the families of the victims have started speaking out. In 1984, they formed the Derbyshire Family Association with just one goal: to uncover the truth. Then in November 1986, there was another bridge-class ship called the Colin Bridge. It got grounded near the coast of Ireland because cracks appeared in the hull while it was out at sea. The ship's hull, already weakened, couldn't withstand the rough Atlantic waves. Colin Bridge. Out of the 6, the last was a bridge-class ship that hadn't undergone the special repair work Peter had found on the other ships. But this time, the British government didn't stay quiet and decided to launch a new investigation. Peter and the other family saw a glimmer of hope. Over the next 6 months, various experts gave their opinions in this investigation. Some blamed the design, others blamed the sea. But none of Peter's evidence got any attention in this investigation. His proof, which was directly structural, they cleverly brushed aside any talk of failure. The investigation report said there was no structural failure found in the MV Derbyshire or the bridge-class ships. The Derbyshire was just another ship that got caught in the rough sea waves. For the families who had been fighting this battle for years, the report felt like a slap in the face. After the second investigation, the families were losing hope. All they kept saying was that the secret of the Derbyshire sinking wasn't the sea, but the system itself. But those families never gave up. In 1994 International, a private investigation team was formed in collaboration with the Transport Workers Federation. Everyone chipped in to fund the mission, and a plan was made to search for the MV Derbyshire in the ocean after 14 years. Surprisingly, within just 23 hours, the Derbyshire was found intact, 4 kilometers beneath the surface. This was truly a huge success. But to solve this mystery, every part of the ship underwater was photographed, and the investigation continued for the next 6 years. After 6 years, the investigation report, the whole truth came out clearly. It turned out that at the very front of the ship, there's a storage area called the bosun's store. This store holds important deck maintenance stuff like ropes, tools, chains, and so on. That night, during the storm, when the MV Derbyshire was rocking on the waves, the door of the bosun's store, which wasn't built according to the original design, suddenly broke open and started filling up with water. Thousands of gallons of water flooded into the bosun's store, making the front part of the ship really heavy, and it sank even further underwater. Now the waves were crashing down from an even greater height. The ventilators broke, and water flooded the machinery room. The bowsprit bent even more, and then in a big wave, The hatch cover of a container as big as a tennis court, where iron was stored, also broke. First, one container filled with water, causing the next section to sink even further. And before anyone knew it, all the containers went underwater one by one. Then the Derbyshire, which was Britain's largest vessel, sank into the dark waters of the Pacific Ocean. When the investigation report came out, it was found that the company that built all these bridge-class ships had all their bosuns. The store had cracks, and all the hatch covers were fragile and not made up to standard. At first, families thought there might be some structural failure in the ship, but the investigation revealed that it wasn't any major design fault, rather. A series of small mistakes caused a mighty steel fortress to sink. During the 1970s, many ships sank every year. For the authorities, it became just a normal thing, a numbers game. But the Derbyshire families did their own private investigation and exposed the shipping industry. After that, new ship designs came in, and the rules got much stricter. They started paying attention to safety inspections. They didn't just find one ship, they ended up changing the entire industry. Even today, many shipping industry rules exist because of the MV Derbyshire, which now lies silently on the ocean floor, 4 kilometers down in the Pacific Ocean. Hopefully, you all will like and share this Low Farwa TV video a lot. Thanks so much for your love and supportive comments. See you in the next amazing video.